It's Saturday, and you know what day it is for this episode of AKAPAD's The Film Buff Podcast. It's animation. So if you're not in the mood for some animation and good old cartoon talk, you're going to have to wait till Monday, my AKA Padders. We're talking about a new drop, something literally that just went live last night. I paid the $20. I watched The Watchmen, Part 1 from DC Animation, from Warner Brothers Animation. Are they a dying company? Because from the quality of this, you might say yes. Well, I may agree with that. Let's hit that in.
Camera speed.
Sound production, take one.
Action!
What's unadaptable? Like, that's the absolute true question. Can we adapt Watchmen? Can we accept that Zack Snyder's full work on Watchmen is an absolute masterpiece? We live in a world where that's not accepted. So, we have to give it another swing. Well, how about an HBO live-action sequel to Watchmen? Give it another swing. How about an animated adaptation of Watchmen? Separated, broken up in two parts. Part 1, Part 2. DC Animation, and I've seen so much heat on this, they just dropped a 3-part Infinite Earths. Crisis on Infinite Earths. They dropped a 3-part, 90 minutes apiece movie series. It's a 3-part series. So now they're making Watchmen a 2-part series. This is roughly 90 minutes. I paid the $20. As soon as I saw it, I said yes. Because we're doing animation. And sometimes, for the growth of all of this, it pays to be topical. It pays to be on top of things. We have Furiosa tonight. Now, by the time you listen to this, it will be live. But tonight, Furiosa drops on HBO Max. We're going to be watching that. I'm bringing that to you right away during all of this Alien Romulus hoopla. And we're marching along with all of those individual releases. So, as you guys know, a lot of the episodes here on this podcast, some of them are pre-recorded. They're ready. They're in queue, just ready to go live. And a lot of them are recorded along the way. And that's a big movement I wanted to achieve this year. And I've spent a lot of the years, a lot of the months dedicated at the beginning of this year to really hit the ground running and get over this hump. So what is The Watchmen exactly? Why can't we adapt this thing universally, on a universally loved level? It's easily, Watchmen is the greatest comic book, aka maxi-series, ever created. It originally was 12 issues with no ads, and what you got was appendices. You get these this extended material at the end of each one, and then you got like a full issue, a full story. And it took a little bit to come out. I believe not all of it came out on time. I have a good stack of the original issues because I always buy them cheap. I own multiple versions and printings of Watchmen. The best one, outside of just the regular, what they call now a graphic novel, because Watchmen's not a graphic novel, but it's a trade paperback. But the best one of all of those, it's called DC Noir, Noir. It's a black and white version of Watchmen. It's a little bit bigger, format-wise, than your standard American comic book, but holy crap, the Noir Watchmen is jaw-dropping. What's the story? What makes it so fantastic? It's wild. It's hard to pinpoint what makes Watchmen so good. I think so much of Watchmen exists in the mind. It's a work. It's a material that puts a spell on you. Is it about Dr. Manhattan leaving Earth? Is it about the fall of civil order? Is it about compromising and seeing truth all the way to its end? And that end is finite. The end is you. Like, that's Rorschach. Is it moving on from the past? Or is the past correct? Which is why we see so much nostalgia. Nostalgia is a recurring theme throughout this. It's a loaded gun. And with all great works, I really feel like the great works cannot be pinpointed. I mean, again, this is the AKAPAD, the Film Buff podcast. You kind of want to say that about what I consider the greatest movie of all time, All That Jazz. It's so hard to pinpoint the point of that movie. Now, recently I went off on The Bike Riders, the Jeff Nichols movie, of not having a point. But this is what separates everything, where when it's hard to when it's hard to know a point of a movie versus not knowing what a point of a movie is, right? Like, that's a little bit of a dichotomy there that could be confusing, but I'm hoping some of you out there know what I mean by this. Some movies have a point. They're intended to have a point, and that's great. You can be a great movie, or you can be like a Citizen Kane or a Apocalypse Now and not quite know the point of the movie, but you experience something great. You have experienced something. And Watchmen, that's what I mean about Watchmen, lives in the mind. It's a work that I have read and reread, that I have, for lack of a better term, kept at my bedside for a very long time. We can say what we want about this adaptation. I believe it was adapted by J. Michael Straczynski, right? I'm not having a lot of luck digging up the credits and the info for this, which I don't like here. I guess we'll have to go to IMDb. Yeah, I guess I should use more IMDb, since I am a pro member of. And I don't just see, like, even on IMDb, I don't get the full credits. But either way, it's written by a comic book guy, and he uses the Black Freighter. The Black Freighter is a comic book within Watchmen. It's a comic book within a comic book. This has infinitely confused individuals as to the meaning. I'm pretty clear on the meaning. I'm not going to get into that. But the Black Freighter comic book is shifted to emulate what's happening on screen. So they use some of the story, they use some of the panels from Watchmen to mirror what's happening in the real world, meaning what we see, how Watchmen is unfolding when we're watching that. That's what we're calling the real world. And it's okay. Like, it's not there. The animation for this, though, I don't know. What are we doing? I mean, some of this I want to see it go further, because I think it has capabilities. I think this can go somewhere. It's very exciting, but it's not quite there, and it just looks choppy or loose, or it just doesn't feel natural. It just doesn't feel good when you're watching it. I love the coloring. I love the tone for this, but overall, as a experience, no one would watch this thinking it came from the greatest comic book of all time. I believe when it comes to DC and Warner Brothers, and believing that they're sacred cows, and believing that some items have to be maintained, this goes right to Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, where Disney would release that on VHS every 7-8 years, and every time they released it, it was a big effing deal. It was a big deal. Disney held that. They held Cinderella. They even held Fantasia to that accord. DC needs to do that with some of their work here. They're currently on the run of DC compact graphic novel reprints. They retail for $10. I bought 4 of them last week, and I'm going to be doing a YouTube video on them. And Watchmen's in that lineup. So you can buy Watchmen for $10, which is, like, it's good if it's going to find new readers, but it's not going to find new readers through this animation. So it's good that, like, this readily available version, if you can find it, is there. Watchmen should never have an HBO Max or HBO series sequel. Watchmen should never have the Doomsday Clock, by Jeff Johns and Gary Frank. This is another sequel that somehow takes place in the proper DC universe, the ones where the Flash runs around in. The contention of that book is that somewhat Dr. Manhattan created the DC universe when he left this Earth. It's insane. Watchmen should not be touched. It should never be touched. If Zack Snyder got away with what he did and he creates a masterpiece, just let that be. I kind of want to go back to The Crow, where we have this Crow remake coming out. And what are we doing with that? We have a perfect Crow movie. I understand. Because a lot of time's passed since that Brandon Lee Crow. Right? And who directed that? Alex Proyas? I believe. I always forget. Or Steve Norringham. No, Alex Proyas. And it kickstarted this whole Crow illusion, this Crow revolution, spin-off movies, syndicated action series, Saturday afternoon type show. The comic books continued, but no one ever said, look, can we just give up on Crow? And, let's create something new or find something new, because there's plenty of Crow wannabes out there that deserve attention. There's some good ones. And you're probably saying, well, Pete, name the good ones, because you always say people should name things. We're not talking about it. Let me just get through this Crow point, please. And then we have to look back at the Brandon Lee Crow and say, this was perfection. This was the absolute pinnacle of what we could do with this idea, even in comic book form. Do I believe the movie needs some of the surreal imagery of the comic? Yeah, like the horse running into the barbed wire fence. The movie needs that. But we got a masterpiece regardless, aka Patter. So what do we do? What do we do when we cannot move on from some of these franchises, some of these properties? It's not like Art Spiegelman's Mouse, M-A-U-S. Where's that animated movie at, right? You kind of want to say the things that are untouched are a little bit more valuable at this point. Thank God they haven't remade Citizen Kane. Thank God Mouse can exist. It can exist as a book, and you have to read Mouse. You have to get the book to experience it. But not Watchmen. Watchmen has been used and abused. I am with Alan Moore. Alan Moore is famously does not want anything to do with these adaptations. I don't think he even accepts royalties, and I love him for that. I stand with Alan Moore. I believe that DC Comics needs to revert the rights back to Alan Moore. I think DC Comics needs to do extra work for a true public apology to Alan Moore. I think all the people involved with stealing or ripping Watchmen from his hands should be put on a public trial of sorts. I mean, if social media is not good for anything, it should be good for this. Social pressure DC to give up the Watchmen. So the animation style for this, though, I just feel like I would like to see it keep going, because I think it can go somewhere. The production method looks like they're rolling out a lot of stuff in this new style. And what is the new style? I don't know. It's like CG, probably a lot of motion capture, but it's got, like cell shaded rendering. This work, though, looks like the Dave Gibbons drawings, especially with Dr. Manhattan. So it's a lot of stuff, right? It's a lot of things that don't quite click. The story and the way that they work their way through the book, and they don't end it on like a note. It's just like a part one. So, like, I hate that. Like, I just like that to the umpteenth degree, if I can say that, my AKAPADers. So you dislike something, but you see a emerging technology, you see a emerging artistry. I'm impressed of the accuracy of the Dave Gibbons style to this. We've always said we want style translated to animation and to sculpture or like action figures or figures, right? We're in an age where a lot of a style and even a person's likeness can end up in a mass-produced action figure or statue. It really can. Like, we're light years from where all that began. And we're at a similar stage with animation. I'm more curious of where they end up technology-wise and what the intersection is of how well we can emote feeling. Like animation is valuable because we get a extended view of a emotion. We get this extended look at a reaction of a feeling. Animation does this unlike any other medium. But Watchmen's a somber story. And it's hard to know the focus of Watchmen sometimes because it's so vast and there's so many equal plot points that all converge at the end. There's so many storylines. Like every thread gets wrapped up in Watchmen. But I will address this. Early on in Watchmen, we get a look at Ozymandias' desk. Somewhat of the running plot for Ozymandias, he's developing this action figure line. So they just have these action figures, and we see them in his office, and we see him on his desk. And later in this, it's referenced that, hey, the toy company wants to talk to you. They want to expand the line, but they need villains. They want to use some of your villains. As the elevator is closing, Ozymandias says, well, all my villains are dead, and end scene. Dun dun dun, right? But that means nothing. It's a meaningless throw in. But when we first see his action figures in the comic, we see the action figures as twisted. Their heads are backwards, their limbs they just look like corrupted. They look corrupted, right? Key word there. And later when we find out what Ozymandias' scheme is, right? He's going to kill tens of thousands of people to trick the world into world peace. He's going to create world peace on the eve of destruction, and he's going to sacrifice tens of thousands of people for it. And along the way, he's going to outsmart everyone. He's going to do it in a way that Dr. Manhattan, who is Spock, right? He's beyond logical. He can see the future, and he can see what the balance is and see kind of what the big picture is. He agrees with Ozymandias. Again, Ozymandias outsmarts Dr. Manhattan. And Dr. Manhattan basically helps Ozymandias clean up the loose ends by killing Rorschach. That's really where the story goes. But again, not the point of the story, not the intent. But that's where the story goes. And we might say that those action figures bent and broken kind of on the desk that we see inside this comic, it represents the corruption of Ozymandias, that he is a little bit off. Because you have to be off to try and pull off what he's doing. You have to be off to do something so ridiculous that you outsmart Dr. Manhattan, that Dr. Manhattan yet cannot see or figure out everything that's happening. And you kind of have to be a little bit nutty to try this during a doomsday scenario, right? Like it's an odd perfect storm, but you gotta be a little bonkers. And that's what those action figures represent. It's like this subtle agreement with us, with the audience. And I don't care what Dave Gibbons has said about this. I don't know if he said anything. I don't know what Alan Moore has said about that panel. I don't know. I don't care. Because the work is ours now, and we get to interpret and debate it. It's not up to the creators to tell us the meaning of things. This is why we don't like Ridley Scott talking about Prometheus, or Ridley Scott talking to us about Blade Runner. But in this shot, when they do that, when we see those action figures on the desk in this animated feature, they just look like regular action figures falling over on a work desk, missing the point. And that's where we're going to end it. I would not recommend this. I would stay away from it. Read the maxi-series.